Amen. Good evening. Oh, there's a faint ripple there. Good evening. Anyway, my name is Jack. Paul got that right. So I work for a few organisations. I work for Swim, so basically trying to persuade churches across the region and the southwest to invest in young people. And I also am part of the team at the North Devon House of Prayer. If you've ever been there, centre of town. Ask about it later. Worship night tomorrow night. Little plug. Shameless. We're passionate about seeing a movement of prayer and worship across the nation. We believe prayer works. We believe prayer can change a nation and a generation. So that's what we're about. So tonight we're going to be sharing, or I've been asked to share, about Daniel and the lion's den. Now, it's a bit of a classic. So I have 2 young children, and so I have the joy of every night reading through the kids' Bibles. And if any of you grew up in church, you may have known these like random stories your parents read you as a child. Now, I started reading through it, and I'm getting a bit worried because I don't know what I'm reading to my children. Because there's moments where you go as a parent, let's read Noah's Ark. It's the lovely one with the animals, isn't it? And you go, yeah, and also the one where billions of people drowned. Like, Daddy, can I read David and Goliath? Yeah, lovely. Yeah, it's the one where the little boy comes and takes his 5 stones and chops off the head of a giant. You're like, what am I reading to my child? This is like one of those stories. It's actually quite gruesome. And I'm just going to put a bit of context into Daniel and the lion's den. You've probably heard it, but it's probably like one of those random stories you're like, it's probably in the Old Testament, and I think it's in the Bible. But what does it have to do with the story of God? So did you do Abraham last week? Did I hear that? Yes. Okay. So starting near enough at the beginning of the Bible, we get this guy called Abraham, and God chooses him and says, I'm going to choose you and your family, and through your family, the whole world is going to be blessed, and you're going to be special and set apart. And this family grows and grows, and it becomes the people of Israel. You've probably heard of them. And they end up in Egypt. They get taken out of Egypt by a guy called Moses. They go across the Red Sea, lots of plagues, and end up in the desert. And that's where God kind of really sets these people apart. And he gives them these lists. It's where they get the 10 Commandments. Like, this is things you should do to follow God, and here's a list of things you really shouldn't do. So stuff he wanted them to do was like, don't worship idols, don't commit adultery, don't get into greed, don't abuse the poor or refugees, and above all, do not ignore God. And there's some things that he wanted them not to do as well. So this is how you worship God. And so it's kind of like saying, he gave us his rules, and he gave them some consequences as well. Like my kids, it's hard enough to get them to do anything. But I usually do 2 things to get them to do something. Firstly, I threaten them with massive punishment. So I pick something they really want. And it changes over time, but usually sweets that they get at the end of the day. If they do something naughty, I take them away. Or sitting on the step, or, some sort of corporal punishment, like beating. No, I don't do that. And then I offer them treats. So I'm like, if you do this, and particularly, they're clever, my kids. They're only 3 and 4. But they know, in public settings like church, they know I don't have much control. Because I can't shout at church. So my kids we're sat near-ish the front, and as soon as Graham Poland goes to stand up on stage, Holly gets this look in her eye. And she looks at me, she looks back, and I think, I know exactly what you're thinking. Don't you dare. And I try and make my body like a human shield to stop her from running on the front of the stage and like diving at the music equipment and making a massive scene. So I have to promise her, so I say, if you're good, you're going to get a treat when you get home. You're going to get sweets. So I offer them 2 things, massive punishment or really good treats. I say, if you do those 2 things, then hopefully I'll have some sense of control. Now, it's a very bad analogy. It's a little bit like this in the Old Testament. God says, I'm going to set before you a choice. He says, you can live a life of favor and blessing, living with God the way I intended you to, and this is what your life's going to look like. That can be amazing. Or you can choose to live life your own way. And all these bad things are going to start happening. And so this happens to the people of Israel. They start off okay, but you read a few more chapters through the Bible and stuff starts messing up. And eventually you get to a point of King David. That's why David and Goliath comes in. There's a bad king before called King Saul. And King David does an okay job, messes up on the way a little bit, but he's a good guy, essentially. And then after David, some of his sons start screwing things up. And it's like this most frustrating moment where you start like shouting at the Bible as you read it. Now, has anyone been watching Apprentice recently? Okay, this week particularly, I could not believe what happened. There's this guy called Paul, and I think Alan Sugar's quite a stern guy, if ever you've watched The Apprentice. And whatever Alan Sugar says kind of goes. And if you're trying to win 250 grand and some help in business, you just, whatever he says, you put up with. But this guy, Paul, did anyone watch it? Yeah, he started answering back. And like Alan Sugar kept saying, well, I think you really didn't plan that very well. And he's like, if you want to think that, that's fine. I couldn't believe it. He started answering back. But I started screaming at the TV. I'm like, what are you doing, man? The other girl was about to go, and he started like shooting himself in the foot. Because you're reading these parts of the Bible, with the kings particularly, you're reading it, and one of them does okay, and you think, okay, they've got it. They've read the Bible, and they understood there's blessings, and they do okay. And the next, 25, screw it up, and then screw it up, and then screw it up again. It's like they haven't read it, they just keep messing up. You're like, what are you doing? But they kept messing up. And there's one thing I want you to point out. That can be a really frustrating part of the Bible to read. But it's also a really encouraging one. I think sometimes we get the idea that there's two gods in the Bible. There's Old Testament God, who's kind of mean and angry, and there's New Testament God, who's nice and fluffy and all about love and stuff like that. But I think it's the same God. The Bible says it's the same God, and you read through the Old Testament, and he's so patient. He's so patient. He gives them chance after chance after chance. And do you know if that was me? Do you know what I'd do? I'd probably be like, okay, mess up again, lightning bolt, you're done. I'd be like, you're gone. You're gone off the earth, I'm starting again, I'll pick someone else who'll try harder. And he even threatens to sometimes. But he gives them chance after chance after chance. And just firstly, as I was thinking about this for where we're going to get to Daniel, some of us need to know that God gives us chance after chance. And yeah, there are consequences of sin, and yeah, there are things he calls us to walk away from. But God is not a mean, angry God in the sky waiting to hurt you as soon as you mess up. Actually, God is a patient God, and God is a father, even here in the Old Testament, that is constantly calling his children back to him. And no matter where you're at right now, you may feel like, I just keep messing up, and it's been time after time, and I've walked the wrong way. But actually, God is a good dad. He's a good father. He's a good Lord God, and he's calling you back always. He's always the one that would go further to call you back to him. And so God keeps giving the people of Israel, people of God, a chance. But eventually, they make so many times they turn away from him. He says, fine, and he gives them the consequence. And that was to be taken away from their country. And this empire called the Babylonian Empire comes in, and they take over the country. They destroy a lot of the cities. They take the best of the resources and the best of the people, and they carry them away to Babylon. And now Daniel, who wrote the book of Daniel, shocking, is one of those young guys, potentially guys your age, potentially a teenager, and gets taken into captivity with his three mates. And I've practiced this. You ready? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. No applause. Okay, move on. That was worse than a ripple. That was worse than no applause, I think. Yeah, so they get taken away. And not only that, they get taken to be the advisors to the emperor of the Babylonian Empire. And I tried to think of an equivalent, and they got their names changed as well to they're named after the gods of this country. The only equivalent I could think of was, imagine you live in World War II England, and for some reason history's changed and we lose the Battle of Britain. Imagine, so Nazi Germany's taken over. You get taken as a captive. You get your name changed to be called Servant of Satan, and you have to go and serve Hitler as one of his advisors. That's kind of the equivalent of what Daniel and his mates were going through. Like, where is God in that? Where is God in that? You think this was a dark moment for some of these guys. And it would have been so easy to look at how ungodly that world was and how tough that situation was and going, man, that's impossible. We can't. How can God work here? You know, they could just give up. Or they could have blamed God and said, God, it's your fault. I didn't deserve to be here. It's not my fault. It was my parents' generation. It wasn't even us that have done this. Why are we here? And guys, we could look around at our world and our society and the media and think, man, this is difficult to be a Christian. And it's difficult to be a Christian here. It's impossible. You know what? I'm just going to give up. It's too hard. I'll live my life safe. I'll go with the flow. I won't put my head above the parapet too much, and I'll just keep quiet. But man, our situation cannot be worse than the situation Daniel and his mates were going through. And you know what, guys? We believe in a supernatural God. If we believe the Bible, if we believe in Jesus and his stories, and when we read the stories like feeding of the 5,000, or how God blessed Abraham, or walking on water, or people getting healed, and you know, even more so if we get to experience that stuff ourselves and hear from God speaking to us, or seeing someone healed in front of our eyes, you know, we lose the right to look at situations the same way. We lose the right to look at food and go, well, that can't feed many people. If we believe God can multiply food, we have to look at the world differently, don't we? We lose the right to get a diagnosis when we get cancer or we get sick and go, well, I'm done. We go, no, I believe in a God that can break in to those situations. Just an example. Anyone here like Marvel films? No hidden geeks in the room? Yeah? So I love Marvel films. There's always a moment in the first of a Marvel film where they introduce a new superhero, where they start to discover their talents, don't they? Like with Spider-Man, he's like, oh, I've got like webbed hands. Come on, I can climb a wall. And it's usually quite embarrassing. They usually like take a few minutes scrabbling around, trashing stuff, or stuff goes wrong where they start to experiment with their powers. But after a few minutes in the film, they get to this moment where they look at an obstacle and they think, I can take that. What I used to not be able to do, like jump over a building or smash up a tank or whatever it is, suddenly they can do. You see, they don't look at the world in the natural way anymore, because suddenly supernatural things are possible. Guys, we cannot look at the world the same way anymore. See, supernatural things are available to you through the power of God. Supernatural breakthrough is available to you. So you don't have to rely on the resources of the world, the money the world relies on, or the power the world relies on. So you've got all the resources available to you because you know Jesus. And because in line with his will, the Bible says you can do anything. Anything. So we are getting to Daniel, I promise. See, God wants to use a group of ordinary people, just like us. See, Daniel, I think he was just a normal guy. The Bible says Elijah, another amazing guy in the Bible, raised people from the dead, pretty impressive resume. It said he was a man just like us. It said he prayed, and for is it 40 days? I've forgotten it now. For years it didn't rain. And he prayed it did. He raised people from the dead, and he was a man just like us. And there are some keys in Daniel's life that I wanted to look at of why he can make such an amazing impact. And if you don't, we're going to read the Bible now, but those three things are: he had integrity, he was a man of prayer, and he was a man of courage. If you have Bibles, I'm going to read it out anyway. We'll go from Daniel 6. I'm going to read all the way through to verse 28 because it's got the whole story. So, wait for my phone to catch up. Daniel 6. So it pleased Darius, that was the king at the time, to set over the kingdom 120 rulers to be throughout the whole kingdom. Over them 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was one, to whom these rulers would give an account, so the king might not suffer loss. Then this Daniel became so distinguished above all the other rulers and satraps, that's another word for ruler, because an excellent spirit was in him. And the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. And the rulers sought to find a ground for complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom, but they could find no ground for complaint or any fault or error because he was faithful, and no error or fault was found in him. Then these men said, we can't find any ground for complaint against Daniel unless we find it in connection with the law of his God. And these rulers came to agree and said to the king, O King Darius, live forever. All the rulers have decided that the king should establish a law and enforce an injunction that whoever makes petition to praise to any god or man for 30 days except to you shall be cast into the lion's den. Now, O king, establish the law and sign the document so that it cannot be changed, which cannot be revoked. Therefore, King Darius signed the law. When Daniel knew the document had been signed, so listen to this bit, he knew it had been signed. He went to his house where he had open windows towards Jerusalem. He got down on his knees and 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks to God as he had done previously. Then these men came and found Daniel making petition and plea before God. They came near and said to the king, "O king, did you not sign a law that anyone who makes petition to any god or man within 30 days except to you shall be cast to the lion's den?" The king answered, "The law stands fast." And then they answered the king that Daniel is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you or to the law you have signed, and makes petition to his God 3 times a day. When the king heard these words, he was distressed and set about to save Daniel. And he labored until the sun went down to rescue him. But these men came by agreement and said, "That law cannot be changed." And the king commanded, "Throw Daniel into the lion's den." The king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you." And a stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his signet ring. The king went to his palace and spent the night. No diversions were brought to him, and sleep fled from him. Then at the break of day, the king arose and went and ran to the lion's den. As he came near to the den where Daniel was, he cried out in anguish and said, "O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve, been able to save you?" And Daniel replied, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel. He shut the mouths of the lions, and they have not harmed me, because I was found blameless." Then the king was exceedingly glad and commanded that Daniel be taken out of the den. Daniel was taken out of the den, and no kind of harm was found on him, because he had trusted God. And it goes on, and the guys who tried to throw Daniel in the lion's den got thrown in themselves. The 3 things that Daniel had: integrity, massive integrity. You see, he didn't compromise. See, he was near enough like the second ruler in the whole of this empire. He had a lot to lose. And it said he so distinguished himself among the rulers, with exception, that the king was planning to set him above all of them. And no ground or complaint or corruption could be found in him. So in the book of Peter in the New Testament, it says this. It says, "Be careful to live properly among your unbelieving friends. Because even if they accuse you of doing wrong, they will see your honorable behavior, and they will give honor to God when he judges the world." So that's the first thing. I think if you pursue excellence and integrity, God will put you in a position of influence. If you pursue excellence and integrity, God will put you in a position of influence wherever you're at. Colossians 3:23, it's in the New Testament, says, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as if working for the Lord, not for men. So imagine Jesus was watching you when you go and stack those shelves at Tesco's. How would you act? I shared a bit more earlier that I worked at Sainsbury's for about 3 years, and there was one day where I got put onto bakery. I actually liked it because you get over the monotony of just like beep, beep. We were sharing this. We feel the pain. So getting on a different department was quite good. And one day, so I was just stacking. I had to stack bread, and it was quite a busy day, and we were behind, and so I was just quickly stacking this bread, and I noticed somebody else doing it on the aisle behind me. They're stacking bread in bakery. And just kept going for like my shift. And at the end of the shift, this guy came up to me, and it turns out he was one of the brand new deputy managers of the store. And he said, "Oh, Jack, I noticed you working. You worked harder than I've seen anyone else work for a while. Do you want a job on bakery?" I said, "Bakery is quite a good place to work." I was like, "Yeah, why not?" You see, I didn't know he was a deputy manager. But because he saw integrity, because he saw I worked hard when I didn't think anyone was looking, I had the opportunity to get another position of influence in the shop. You see, most people in life, we're just trying to get through life with as little effort as possible. Don't you think? We're just trying to cruise through life and as easy as possible and keeping our head down. But when you guys as teenagers start serving your employer with integrity and excellence, as if Jesus was watching you, as if you're working for God himself, I tell you, you'll make an impact. You'll get noticed. You'll have an opportunity to have influence for the gospel. You see, and that second thing, that verse in Peter, it says, if you work that way, those other people will give honor to God when he judges the world. Our behavior can have such an impact on other people that they may come to know God. But think about it the other way. See, if our behavior and our language and our lifestyle looks just like everybody else, how hollow does it sound when we go, yeah, guys, Jesus has changed my life. Come to A2J or come to United Generation or come to this event. And they go, yeah, but you look like us. You're exactly the same. You see, if we're just as obsessed with our image and with social media, if we're out partying and drinking like everyone else, if we're gossiping and pulling people down, like, what does it say about our faith? We say, yeah, he's changed our life. And they're like, yeah, well, not by much. What does it say? It undermines our message. And guys, it's not to say we won't mess up. It's not to say it's not difficult. It's not to say it's not a challenge. But our aim and our goal should be, yeah, I'm heading for this thing where I'm looking different. And I'm going to stand out. And I'm going to make a difference where I work and where I go to school or college. I'm going to be different. See, Daniel stuck to what he knew to be right, not caring about what those people thought. Second thing was courage. You see, in a world where God is not respected and God is not honored, whether it's thousands of years ago in Babylon or whether it's Barnstable in 2016, guys, it takes courage. It takes courage to live the life that God is calling you. You see, Daniel here, he showed immense courage. I want to challenge you, like, what do you want your tombstone to say when you're gone? See, when people remember you, what are they going to remember you for? Is it going to be, yeah, so he stuck his head down, he did everything his manager wanted of him, he went through college, he got a mortgage, went to his job, had some kids and died. Played it safe, had a good pension, lived a comfortable life. Is that it? Is that the goal of our lives? You know, we play it safe, we go through life, and that's nice. Guys, we have one chance. We have one chance. See, in verse 10 it says, as soon as he heard about the decree, so he fully knew the cost, he went home, he went upstairs, and he prayed to God as he'd always had done. You see, if that was me, I'd be tempted to adjust it a little bit. Okay, God, I'm going to pray 3 times a day, but I'm just going to nip to the toilet and just spend 20 minutes, just pretend I've got a problem or something. I'm like, guys, yeah, I'm just off home, that thing again. Hide in a cupboard or somewhere. I'd have kind of just shifted it, gone, oh, well, we've got to be politically correct these days, haven't we? With that whole new law. But no, he stuck to what he knew to be right. And maybe he was inspired by his 3 mates, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Earlier in this book, have you heard of the fiery furnace, that story? Also in kids' Bibles. You see, a previous king had set up a huge gold statue and said, when the music plays, you can't worship God, you've got to worship me in that statue. And they said no. And they get brought before the king, they stood there, and they said this. He said, if we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us. And he will deliver us. But even if he doesn't, we want you to know we will not serve your gods or worship the image you've set up. I'm like, man, that's guts, isn't it? To go before the king and be like, do you know what? I'm not doing it. And even if you throw me in, even if God doesn't save me, I'm not doing it anyway. Guys, right now across the Middle East, thousands of Christians are getting killed for their faith. Children and teenagers are getting killed for following Jesus. You guys might have heard of ISIS in the news and some of that Islamic extremism in the Middle East. Because it costs to be a Christian. It may not feel like that very much here at the moment, but it costs to be a Christian. Children and teenagers are standing up against terrorists and going, no, you can torture me, you can kill me, but I will not renounce Jesus. Like, man, that's guts. And if God, you wonder what we do in that position, but if they can stand up and say, no, I'm following Jesus to the end. Guys, what does it look like for us to have courage to stand up in our schools and our college to make a difference? Guys, time is short. One of my biggest regrets in life is not really living for Jesus at college. Because I had such an opportunity in my friendship group. Looking back, the first year of college, nobody knew I was a Christian. I was head down, don't want to be noticed, it's difficult enough in life. I'm just going to go under the radar. The second year, a few more people did, I had a few opportunities, but I played it so safe. But so many of my friends, looking back, were looking for opportunities for Jesus. They were hungry for it. They just didn't know what it was. And yet now, and you think you've got all the time in the world. But I know, I keep in contact with like one of my friends now, years on. I've lost contact, they've moved on, life moves on. I don't see them anymore. And guys, what if I saw right now that one of them had died in a car crash? What would I think about the opportunities I had at college to share my testimony, to share about Jesus? What would I not give to give one more time to just say, guys, Jesus is real. There's an eternity waiting for us. What would I give for that opportunity now? Final thing, Daniel was a man of prayer. See, not only did he pray 3 times a day, but there are some amazing examples in this book. I encourage you, just the first 6 chapters are pretty cool. Some supernatural stuff happens in Daniel. He interprets dreams. He fasts for 3 weeks, and this angel appears saying he's battling a demon. It's quite a cool bit of the Bible. But he was he was a man of excellence that gave him opportunities for influence. And I believe his integrity and his courage kept him there. But actually the breakthrough he saw, I think, is because he was a man of prayer. He's an amazing man of prayer. And through that book, he just prays and prays. And actually, you can read the book of Daniel in like an hour or so. It's not a couple of hours. It's not that long. I think to pray for decades of your life, and all you can write down from what God said to you, you can read in about an hour. That's faith, isn't it? To keep praying. Guys, an example of prayer. I wonder what you think. What good could a blind old lady and her crippled friend do for a nation? Right now, if you saw like a blind old lady come to church on Sunday and she had a crippled friend that could barely get out of her chair, what difference do you think they can make for the kingdom? Well, in 1949, in the islands called the Hebrides, it's just north of Scotland, 2 housebound sisters in their 80s, one blind, the other crippled with arthritis, here's a quote, waging a prayer campaign that delighted heaven and defeated hell. Because 2 days a week, from 10 in the evening until 3 in the morning, week in, week out, they took hold of God. Do you know, as a result, thousands and thousands of people came to know Jesus miraculously. See, pubs shut down and never reopened. People would get convicted in the street and start running to churches just to find someone who could help them. People ended up in the police station because they had this feeling of guilt and they needed to sort it out and they had no idea where to go. It's an amazing story. And there are hundreds of these stories throughout history where a few committed people prayed and entire nations got changed. Do you know, you guys, you can change a generation. You can change a generation. And maybe that's too big to think, nation, generation is too big. But guys, if you change one, what if you could change one life in the next few years? You may have heard me share this before, but guys, if you change one life every 2 years, and everyone in North Devon did that, in 10 years we'd see 8,000 people come to faith. 8,000, just by changing one every few years. And you know, the impact of that is just, it goes on and on for their kids and the people they go and make an impact for. Guys, as we were worshipping, I had a bit of a picture, and I was reminded of some of the pictures we had in the house of prayer before. And lots of these pictures are about North Devon as a place of sending. You see, a lot of people go off to uni and move away from us, North Devon, but the impact some of those people make is amazing. You know, there's so many missionaries serving around the world that have been brought up in North Devon. You see, we had a picture of like of an aircraft carrier, and these planes are taken off, going to do missions and going to change stuff in faraway lands. You know, when we go from this place, you can get so fired up now, guys. You can get so connected to God. You can make an impact wherever you go. And guys, we're going to pray in a moment, and I think some of you guys are going to go change business in this nation. You can go and change politics. You can go and change the world of arts and the media and education. Because guys, if you serve with integrity, if you pursue excellence, if you become a person of prayer, you will, and I guarantee it, you will make a difference for the kingdom.